Carver, Harvey Firestone, Christie Mathewson, Jim Thorpe, Alma Thomas, Corey Ten Boom, Amelia Earhart, Harold Abrams, Eric Liddell, Langston Hughes, Marguerite Henry, Ruth Wakefield, Frida Kalu, Julia Child, Joe Lewis, John Glenn, Stan Lee, Shirley Chisholm, Maya Angelou, Karen Spark Jones, Leslie Stahl, Robert Ballard, Mark Spitz, Jerry Greenfield, Ben Cohen, Louanne Johnson, Steve Jobs, Mae Jemison, Cal Ripken Jr., Steve Irwin, Pastor Jose Vasquez, LeBron James, Tim Tebow, and Gabby Douglas.
And Sean Mars from ABC News.
And Sandra Day O'Connor. Welcome to our 11th annual Biography Tea. We hope you will find our notable guests from the past and present educational, engaging, and inspiring this evening. We are proud of the work each student has done. This project teaches our students a variety of things, including meeting deadlines, time management, organization, following directions, responsibility, research, writing skills, attentiveness, and speaking skills, all in an engaging way. Parents, thank you for all your support. Let's bow our heads for prayer, please. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much that we can all be here tonight. Thank you for the safety and protection that you gave us to getting here. We ask that you be with us as the students share their characters, help them to be a blessing to others and help them to be blessed. And Lord, help us to always remember that you are our role model and have all the characters and that you will bestow them upon us. In thy name, amen. You may be seated, boys and girls. Good evening. This year, I am Sandra Day O'Connor, the first woman Supreme Court Justice. I served from 1981 to 2006, and I was appointed by Ronald Reagan. In 2009, I was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by President Barack Obama, and I grew up on a 198,000-acre cattle ranch without running water or electricity until I was 7 years old. My husband suffered from Alzheimer's disease for over 20 years, and I was involved in raising awareness about this disease. On the Supreme Court, I voted on a case-by-case decision basis and voted with careful deliberation in a way I felt benefited individual rights and the Constitution. I developed a reputation for being firm but just. And I would like to introduce you to Louanne Johnson.
Thank you, Sandra. Good evening, everyone. My name is Louanne Johnson. I'm a former U.S. Navy journalist, Marine Corps officer, high school teacher, and the author of the New York Times bestseller, Dangerous Minds. I served 9 years on active military duty, first as an enlisted journalist in the Navy, and later as a second lieutenant in the Marine Corps, where I earned awards for my work as a journalist and radio TV broadcaster. While on active duty, I earned a BS in psychology. Following my honorable discharge, I attended graduate school to earn a Master of Arts in teaching English. In 1989, I began teaching reading and writing to the non-English speakers as an intern in a high school in California. 2 years later, I was appointed department chair of a special program for at-risk teens. During the government evaluation of 10 similar pilot programs, my group was rated first in academic achievement, increased self-esteem, and student retention. In 1992, I wrote a memoir, My Posse Don't Do Homework, about my experiences working with at-risk teens. The book was published in 8 languages, and it was adapted for the 1995 box office hit Dangerous Minds, starring Michelle Pfeiffer. Drill sergeants are able to be intimidating, no matter what size. My first day at school, I walked up to one of my students who had just thrown a book. I got really close to his face and just stared at him until the sweat started to form on his upper lip. After a while, all of his buddies backed away from him. I told him, I would appreciate it if you would sit down right now, young man. And to my surprise, he did. I told the students, I'm too young to retire, and I'm too mean to quit. I'm here to help you become successful people, and I'm not leaving. I will never make you read out loud, but you are required to think. My philosophy is when students believe success is possible, they will try. My character trait is resilience because I never gave up on any of my kids. Since then, I've continued to teach. I've taught high school English, adult ESL, and developmental reading. I'm presently a full-time professor of teacher education at Santa Fe Community College in New Mexico. I continue to write, and I'm the author of 7 nonfiction books, most recently, Teaching Outside the Box, How to Grab Your Students by Their Brains. Thank you. I'd like to introduce our interviewer for the evening, Miss Leslie Stahl.
And I'm Leslie Stahl. Good evening, and this is Biography Tea. I know you were thinking 60 Minutes, because that is what I am best known for. I started my career as a journalist very young, and I developed the character trait of being tenacious. In fact, one of my colleagues once described me as saying she was likely to scratch her eyes out on her way to get to the phone booth to report a story. I met my current husband during the Watergate investigations, and my husband went on to write some, he was a journalist, but he also went on to become a playwright. And my passion is getting to the bottom of things, and I love interviewing people. And in my career, I have interviewed many amazing people, presidents, Hollywood stars, and I am very much looking forward this evening to getting to know the incredible lineup that TLC Prep has presented for you this evening. My first guests are going to be the kindergarten class at TLC Prep. Kindergarten. Get your cameras ready. I don't think there's a cuter array of kindergartners anywhere. And ma'am, what is your name?
Dolly Madison.
And Miss Madison, what are you most famous for?
I'm famous for my husband was the 4th president of the United States of America.
And is there anything else that you're noted for besides being the First Lady?
No. I liked throwing parties, and I liked making gingerbread.
And if I remember correctly, I understood that your favorite ice cream was oyster. Would not have been my first choice. And you, sir?
P.T. Barnum.
And Mr. Barnum, what are you best known for?
Making a circus.
Making a circus. And I think there are several people here who have been to a circus, if not, and if it wasn't one of yours, it probably should have been. And you, sir?
Thomas Jefferson.
And Mr. Jefferson, what are you best known for?
I am the third president of the United States, and I will the Declaration of Independence.
And you founded the University of Virginia, and I know you were also a governor of Virginia. Thank you for being with us, sir. And ma'am, your name?
Harriet Tubman.
And Miss Tubman, what are you most known for?
As being a slave, I'm most known for helping other people, other slaves, escape to freedom.
And earlier this week, you were telling me about your favorite fruit.
My favorite fruits were apples.
And you, sir, your name?
John Glenn.
And Mr. Glenn, what are you best known for?
I was the first American astronaut to circle the world 3 times in a rocket ship.
And this week, you told me something about your wife.
I married Annie, and we were friends when we were 3.
Isn't that sweet? Well, thank you, kindergarten class, for being with us this evening. You may go sit with your moms and dads. Pre-first and first grade. Pre-first and first grade. Some handsome young men coming your way. Sir, what is your name?
Mark Spitz.
And Mr. Spitz, what are you best known for?
I was the first person to get 7 gold medals in swimming Olympics.
And you told me an interesting story earlier this week.
In 1972, there was a terrorist attack in the Olympics.
I remember that well. And, I see a basketball. Your name, sir?
LeBron James.
And Mr. James, what are you known for?
Basketball.
And what, especially about basketball, are you known for?
Blocking shots from people that are not on my team.
And I've heard you're pretty good at that. Yeah? And you, sir?
Tim Tebow.
And Mr. Tebow, what are you known for?
Playing football.
And is there something else you wanted to share with us besides the fact that you played football?
I won the Heisman Trophy.
And what difficulty did you overcome?
Dyslexica.
Yeah, you had dyslexia, but you did learn to read. And I think we were talking earlier this week about some teasing that happened with you or some people making fun of you.
But before the game started, I kneeled and prayed, but then people made fun of me.
Well, thank you for staying strong in your faith and for continuing to pray even when people were making fun of you. And thank you, pre-first and first grade, for being with us this evening. You may go sit with mom and dad. Christie Mathewson. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Mr. Mathewson, would you share with our audience what you are best known for?
I am best known for being one of the top 10 pitchers of all times.
And sir, were there any struggles or difficulties that you had to overcome?
Yes. So people were making me drink and do all of that bad stuff, but I just want to do it.
So a lot of people were tempting you to smoke and drink, but you weren't having any of it. I remember hearing stories about that. Was there a story or a fact about you that you would be willing to share with our audience?
Yes. One day I was ready for a baseball game. Then my mom caught me by saying, "You haven't picked the potatoes off the potato field."
Was that your chore,
Yes.
picking potatoes?
Yes. And so all I play is help me pick the potatoes off the potato fields, and then we were all done. So my mom gave us a good lunch.
So your mom was thankful that your teammates helped you pick all those potatoes, and she gave you a
Yes.
good lunch. What
Yes.
happened next?
They won the game.
You guys won the game?
Yes.
Okay, that's pretty cool. Mr. Mathewson, I get the strong impression that you are a Christian, and people have used that term to describe you. Why do you think they've used the word Christian?
Because my nickname was the Christian Gentleman.
I know I've heard that about you. Well, thank you for your contribution to baseball, and thank you for being with us this evening, and for the positive role model that you were to many.
Thank you for letting me be here.
Harold Abrahams. Good evening.
Good evening.
Mr. Abrahams, would you share with our audience what you are most famous for?
I am famous for winning a gold medal in the 100-meter run at Paris Olympic Games in 1924. I also practice in a 200-meter, 100-meter relay as well as a long jump.
Wow, so you definitely were a speedy man and enjoyed running. Were there any difficulties that you had to overcome?
As a Jew, I had to overcome anti-Semitism, prejudice against Jews.
And sir, is there a story or a fact you would share with us about your life?
I was forced to end my athletic career, permanent injury on my leg. On the long jump event in 1925, 1 year after my gold medal.
So 1 year after your medal, you had to give up running. That's tough. Determined is a character trait I've heard for you. Why determined?
Determination, because I made a point to train hard to be my best, and I paid also after my permanent injury on my leg. I didn't give up on sports, because a sports journalist and a lawyer.
So you had a lot of debts that you worked hard to pay off.
Yes.
Wow. Well, thank you, sir, for your contributions, and thank you for being with us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Maya Angelou. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
Ms. Angelou, in case nobody recognizes your name or your picture, would you tell us what you are most famous for?
I am famous for writing 7 books about my life. One of them is I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings.
And ma'am, what struggles did you encounter? What difficulties or struggle did you encounter?
When I was 8, I was attacked by my mother's boyfriend and couldn't speak for 4 years after that.
You couldn't speak for 4 years after that? Wow. Were there any interesting people that you have met in your career?
President Bill Clinton and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
And what story or fact would you be willing to share with us?
I was also a singer, a dancer, and an actress.
Well, thank you for your contributions to the world of literacy. I know you've inspired many through your works. And I see hopeful is a character trait you think best describes you. Why hopeful?
Because no matter what happened, I remained positive and encouraged others to believe in love and hope.
Well, thank you for that hopefulness and your encouragement, and thank you for being with us this evening.
I enjoyed it.
Good job, sweetie. Hatshepsut. Good evening.
Good evening.
I must say I love your outfit. And
Thank you.
You were a woman ahead of your time. Glasses back then. Would you tell us, in case somebody does not recognize your name, what you are best known for?
I am best known for being the first female pharaoh of Egypt.
And what struggles did that present?
Some things that I had to go through were people trying to stop me from being the queen because I was a woman. And when I was young, my brother died.
Oh, that is terrible. And what story about your life or fact would you be willing to share with us?
Growing up, my mother did not have a lot of time for me because she was the queen and she was very busy. So she hired one of her servants named Citre, and she raised me, and she was like a second mother to me.
And I see that responsible is a character trait that you have chosen. Why responsible?
Because being queen, I had to make sure everybody was treated right. I had to take care of my kingdom and take care of all the people who lived in Egypt.
I cannot imagine the responsibility of being a pharaoh presented. But thank you for your dedication to your country, and thank you for being with us this evening.
It was a pleasure to be here.
Christopher Jones. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Mr. Jones, would you share with us what you are best known for?
I am best known for being captain of the Mayflower.
And what difficulties have you overcome in your life?
I overcame my dad dying when I was 12, and my first wife died.
And I'm sure being captain of the Mayflower, there's probably a lot of stories you have, but is there a story or a fact from your life you would share with us?
Someone I had worked with on my when I was on the Marie Fortune, my dad's ship that I inherited, he got my crew drunk and then encouraged mutiny.
So your crew mutinied against you?
Yes.
Well, then what happened?
I told my family, and they said, "Did they kill you, Father?"
So when your crew mutinied, did you have a fight?
Yes.
And how were you able to win the fight? Because you're still here.
I bought them off with my bare hand.
And is that when your daughter asked you? How old was your daughter when she asked you that?
4.
Okay, that is a cute story. Thank you for sharing that with us. Diligent seems to be a good character trait for you. Why is that?
Because even though my dad died and my wife died, I kept on going.
Well, I know that the pilgrims on the Mayflower that you brought over were very grateful that you were diligent. And thank you for your contribution to our country, and thank you for being with us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
John Hart. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Mr. Hart, what are you best known for?
I am best known for signing the Declaration of Independence. And I have 4 relatives at TLC Prep. I have Jacob Simpson, Natalie Simpson, Vivian Tripp, and Garrett Tripp.
That is so cool. 4 descendants of a signer of the Declaration of Independence. Wow. So, sir, what difficulties did you have to overcome in your life?
The British tried to capture me. My wife died, and my house got burnt down by the British.
And why were the British trying to capture you, and why did they burn down your house?
Because they thought I was a traitor.
For signing the Declaration? And were there any interesting people that you knew?
I knew Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin.
And is there a fact or a story about you would be willing to share with us?
Yes, when When I was 31, I owned 600 acres in Hopewell, New Jersey.
And honest. Why does that character trait describe you so well?
Because when I was a judge, I was honest of what I said and do.
And did I understand that was even part of a nickname for you?
Yes, they called me Honest John.
I think I've even heard that nickname used nowadays. Well, sir, thank you for your sacrifice and for what you did to help establish our country. And thank you for being with us this evening.
Thank you for having me here.
Abigail Adams. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
Mrs. Adams, in case there's anybody here that does not recognize your name, would you tell us what you are best known for?
I was famous for being the second president's wife, John Adams. I was also famous for discussing with my husband on how to make women's education better. I was also the mother of the sixth president, John Quincy Adams.
Those are a lot of accomplishments, a lot to be famous for. Were there any difficulties that you faced?
Yes, my husband and I had a long-distance relationship. He had to work far away in another country. I sent letters of encouragement to him every day. I had to live in the middle of a war with all my children.
And were there any interesting people that you met or that you knew?
I knew Martha Washington. She was the wife of George Washington. I also knew George Washington. He was the first president of the United States.
And I believe your husband and Thomas Jefferson were also friends.
Yes.
Is there a story or a fact about your life that you would be willing to share with us?
Yes. When I was a little girl, I got sick very often, and there weren't many doctors and nurses around. I wanted to attend school badly, but I couldn't. My mom taught my sister and I how to read and write at home.
Well, I'm glad she did, and so is your husband. Caring seems to be a good description of you. Why is that?
I cared for my husband, my children, and for other family members.
And thank you for doing that. Thank you for all you did for our country, and thank you for being with us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
James John Audubon. Okay, that's not pointed at me, is it? Okay. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Just making sure I hadn't done something that upset you. Mr. Audubon, I see a beautiful painting by your name. Does that have anything to do with why you're famous?
Yes, I am famous for painting birds and being a naturalist.
And what difficulties did you have in your life?
I borrowed money from a bank and I didn't pay it all at the right time, so they sent me to jail.
I can see how that would be a difficulty. Were there any interesting stories or facts about you that you would be willing to share with us?
Did you know that all the birds that I painted, I killed and stuffed?
I did not know that. I'm glad you didn't paint me. Sir, why is brave a good description of you?
One time I was riding my horse in the woods, and then I saw this bird, and I had to paint it, so I started painting, and then this bear came. So I finished up my painting, then I got on my horse. My horse was terrified, so it made a lot of noise, and it scared the bear away.
Well, luckily for us, it scared him away so that you were able to continue your paintings and share that with us. Thank you for your contribution to everything, a lot of what we know about birds and nature, and thank you for being with us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Sacagawea. Good evening.
Good evening.
Just in case there's anyone here that does not recognize your name, would you tell us why you are most famous?
I'm famous for helping Meriwether Lewis and William Clark explore the land west of the Mississippi River.
And what difficulties did you encounter?
Hunger. Food was scarce, and sometimes I was very hungry, but I always found a way to stay strong and healthy. I also overcame tiredness. It was a long 4,000-mile journey that made me very tired, especially because I had my baby on my back. I also overcame bad weather. It was a long 4,000-mile journey. There were storms along the way, but I was strong, and I did it.
You are an amazing woman. Are there some stories or facts you'd be willing to share with us?
On the third day of the trip, the explorer's boat was tipped over by a very strong wind. All the supplies were knocked into the river. Everyone panicked because they could not swim except for me. I stayed calm with my baby in one arm. I quickly pulled the supplies out of the river and saved them. Later, Lewis praised my courage and said the things I had saved were worth his life.
And I know that you saved the lives of everyone that was on that journey with you. And so we are thankful that you were there. And, you know, I would have thought of brave as a character trait for you, but I see that you felt resourceful was a better choice. Why is that?
I dug up roots, gathered berries, and found other good food that would keep the men strong and healthy.
Well, they were very lucky to have you with them. And thank you for everything you did for them and for our country, and thank you for being with us this evening.
Thank you.
Louis Braille. I'll be right there, sir. Okay, step up. Another step up. Okay, just a few more steps, sir. Turn around, sit down, and I'll hand you a microphone. Okay, there you go. Good evening, Mr. Braille.
Good evening.
Would you share with us what you are best known for, sir?
I'm famous for creating a raised dot code called Braille.
And who was this raised dot code for?
This was for the blind people.
And Mr. Braille, what difficulties did you encounter in your life?
When I was 3 years old, I was in my father's workshop, and I was messing around with his tools when he was out, and I poked myself in one of my eyes, and it got infected and spread it to my other eye.
And so what was the result of the infection in those eyes?
I became blind.
So you've been legally blind since you were 3 years old?
Yes.
And what story would you be willing to share with us?
After I got blind, there was a priest in my town who always took me out into the yard of the church and took me so I could sense nature with all my other senses, but not with my eyes, because I was
So
blind.
he helped you develop your other senses.
Yes.
And innovative is a character trait that I see you feel best describes you. Why is that?
I chose innovative because when I was a teenager, a person named Charles Barbier came to our school and introduced us to night writing. I asked him if I could help improve his writing, but he didn't want help from me. So I spent 3 years creating a raised dot code called Braille.
And that is the alphabet that blind people use to be able to read?
Yes.
Well, I know you definitely changed the lives of millions of people throughout the world. So thank you for that innovation, and thank you for being with us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. Okay, just a few more steps. A few more steps. Okay, step down, sir. One more step down. There you go. John Muir. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening.
Mr. Muir, by looking at your clothes and your walking stick, I get the impression you're kind of an outdoorsy guy.
Yes.
What are you best known for?
I'm best known for being an environmentalist and protecting and preserving the land you now know as national parks.
Well, I'm very glad you did that. I have definitely enjoyed visiting several of them. Were there any interesting people you met in your career?
Yes, I knew President Theodore Roosevelt and Ralph Waldo Emerson.
And what struggles did you encounter?
When I was young, my father was very strict to me, and he made me memorize the entire Bible. And also, I had to overcome malaria in Florida, and I was in a carriage factory accident, and I became blind for a few months.
But not permanently.
No, ma'am.
And is there a fact or a story you would be willing to share with us?
Yes. You see, it was my first time in the Yosemite, and I saw this big black bear, and I had read about black bears that they run away when you see them. So I ran out there screaming and yelling, and I got like a foot away from the black bear, and I was just like, and it was still there.
You were a foot away from the black bear?
Yeah, and it was just like still there, just like staring at me, like, what are you
And then
doing?
what happened?
And, like, we stared there for like 30 minutes, but eventually it walked away.
Wow. Wow. I see peaceful is the character trait you feel best describes you. Why is that?
Because when World War I came, I would not fight in it. I fled from the army. From
So
being
you
drafted.
believed in obviously in peace and not raising your arms against someone.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, thank you for your contribution to the world of nature and for helping to create these amazing national parks that we enjoy now. And thank you for being with us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Claude Monet. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Mr. Monet, I'm sure many people here recognize your name, but in case they don't, would you tell them what you are best known for?
I am best known for my paintings.
And weren't you with a special group of men?
And I was with the Impressionist group.
And sir, what difficulties have you had to overcome?
My family and I were really poor, so I sold all my paintings for money to buy food.
That shows a lot of devotion and love for your family. Were there any interesting people that you knew?
Yes, I knew Frederick Basil, Pierre Renoir, and Alfred Sisley.
And is there a story you'd be willing to share with us?
Yes. One time I had a painting that was so big, it was 8 by 7 feet long.
Your canvas was 8 feet by 7 feet?
Yes.
How did you hold it up?
I dug a trench in my garden so it would stay up, and I painted 4 women having a picnic.
Wow, that would be an impressive painting to see. I see that you feel creative is the best description for you. Why creative?
I was creative because I painted the plants and animals I saw so I could remember them.
Well, thank you for your contributions to the art world, and thank you for being with us this evening.
Thanks for having me.
Bertha Morissette. Good evening.
Good evening.
And Ms. Morissette, what are you best known for?
I am best known for being one of the first women artists and being in a group of artists called the Impressionists.
So that wasn't just a group of men?
No.
Okay, so I misspoke when I spoke to Mr. Monet. Ma'am, what difficulties have you endured?
Well, I had to overcome oppression because I was a woman. In my time, women did not hold a high position. And I also had to overcome my husband's death. And only a few months later, my only daughter, Julie, caught pneumonia, but luckily I nursed her back to health.
Well, that's good. Were there any interesting people that you knew? Did you know Mr. Monet?
Yes, I did.
And was there anyone else you knew?
Well, most of the people I knew were from the Impressionists group. And these people were Monet, of course, Renoir, Pizarro, and Degas.
And is there a story or fact you would be willing to share with us?
Well, critics, being critics, described our Impressionist group as 5 to 6 maniacs running around, of one which was a woman.
Well, I'm glad you stuck with it. And independent seems to be a good trait for you. Why?
Well, I worked alone, and even though I was part of the Impressionist group, I didn't work with them. And I knew very soon all my work would pay off.
Well, I'm glad you had that confidence. I'm glad you stuck with it. And thank you for your contributions to the world of art and for your inspiration of being a woman artist at a time when it wasn't popular to be that. Thank you for being with us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
George Washington Carver. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Mr. Carver, what are you most famous for?
I am most famous for being a scientist who invented over 300 ways to use peanuts.
Was peanut butter one of them?
No.
Oh, that's too bad because my husband loves peanut butter. I was going to say thank you on his behalf. What difficulties did you face in your life or in your career?
My dad died before I was born, and night riders took my mother, and I never saw her again.
Who raised you?
My slave owners.
So you were an orphan, basically, and a slave. Were there any interesting people that you've met in your career?
Well, I met Booker T. Washington, Thomas Edison, and Theodore Roosevelt.
And what story or fact would you be willing to share with us?
When I was a kid, I was known as the plant doctor because I helped people with their sick plants. And also when I was a kid, I went to leave school to learn more because I knew as much as the teacher.
Wow, that's impressive. And curious, why does that describe you so well?
Because when I was a kid, I wanted to know everything.
And it seems like you still do.
Yes.
Well, thank you for being with us this evening, and thank you for the many contributions you made to the world of science.
Thank you for having me.
Harvey Firestone. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
I must say, I love these mustaches. There's some very handsome men here this evening. Mr. Firestone, why do we recognize your name?
Because I used to make tires for cars and other vehicles.
Well, I, for one, am grateful that you have done that. What struggles did you face in your life?
I lost 2 jobs, but I sold tires cheaper for my company.
And were there any interesting people that you knew?
Yes, I knew Henry Ford and Thomas Edison.
And is there a story or fact you would be willing to share with us?
Yes, I did a radio program with Henry Ford and Thomas Edison. We talked about inventions and working hard so you can accomplish anything.
Well, I'm sure you were an inspiration to many, you along with Mr. Ford and Mr. Edison. And why is creative a good character trait for you?
Because I was unique in how I learned to create different kinds of tires.
And did I also understand that you owned some rubber trees?
Yes,
Where was that?
in Africa.
Did anyone else own the property with you?
Yes, Mr. Ford.
That was very creative too, to own the rubber that you needed to make your, to have the materials, own the materials you needed to make the tires. Well, thank you for being with us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Jim Thorpe. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Mr. Thorpe, what are you most famous for?
I'm most famous for being a college athlete.
And did I understand you won a gold medal?
Yes. I won the gold medal in the
For what event?
Olympics.
Which event in the Olympics?
Running.
And you are a Native American, is that true?
Yes.
So was that significant that you won a gold medal as a Native American?
Yes. I was the first Native American to win a gold medal in the Olympics.
And sir, what difficulties did you have to overcome?
My dad and my mom and my brother died.
And is there a story that you could share with us?
Yes, when I was at school in Kentucky, they called me that my dad got in a hunting accident in Oklahoma. I ran home and it took me two weeks to get to the farm in Oklahoma. My dad was fine, so I went back to school in Kentucky. They called me again that my dad got bitten by a venomous snake and died.
Did I understand you to say you ran from Kentucky to Oklahoma?
Yes.
And you did it in 2 weeks?
Yes.
You must have been fast. Wow. Why does fair describe you so well?
Because I had good sportsmanship.
That is definitely one of the things I heard about you. Well, thank you, sir, for your contributions to the world of sports, and thank you for the inspiration you were to other Native Americans, and thank you for being with us this evening.
It's been a pleasure.
Alma Thomas. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
I must say you look quite lovely this evening. I love the hat. Miss Thomas, what are you best known for?
I am best known for being an African American painter and art educator.
And what difficulties have you had to overcome?
I overcame racial violence in the area I lived in, which later caused my family to move to Washington, D.C. in 1907.
And were there any interesting people you've met along the way?
I met Jacob Kinnan and Tony Sarg.
And what story would you be willing to share with us?
I don't have a story, but I have a fact. I produced the popular children's classic Alice in Wonderland as puppet shows and wrote scripts.
And independent, why does that describe you so well?
Because I painted in my own style, even though I was criticized by peers in my field.
Well, thank you for being true to yourself, and thank you for your contributions in many aspects to the fine arts. And thank you for being with us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Corey Ten Boom. Good evening.
Good evening.
And Ms. Ten Boom, would you tell us why your name seems so familiar to us?
Because my family and I helped Jews escape the Nazi Holocaust during World War II, and we saved nearly 800 lives, and I also wrote a book about it called The Hiding Place.
And so what were some of the challenges that you faced in your life?
We were betrayed by the Nazis during World War II.
And what story, I know you wrote a book, but is there a story you'd be willing to share with us?
I have a fact. The secret room in my dad's watchmaker's shop turned out to be my bedroom. And behind my bedroom, there was a false wall, and that was where we hid the Jews.
So how did you know when it was time to hide?
When World War II started, my dad installed an alarm. So when every single time he saw the Nazis come, he would push a button, and the alarm would go off, and we would hide in 1 minute.
So you only had 1 minute to hide?
Yes.
Wow. Courageous. Why does that describe you?
Because I was never afraid when I had to risk my life to save others.
Well, I know that there are countless lives that have been impacted because of the courage of your entire family. And thank you for sharing that in your book, and thank you for sharing that in the speeches you've made around the world. And thank you for being with us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Amelia Earhart. Good evening.
Good evening.
You're looking very sassy this evening, Ms. Earhart. Would you share with us why your name seems so familiar?
Well, I was a woman pilot, and I did cross the whole world solo and tried to fly across the Atlantic solo.
And what difficulties did you have to face?
Well, a lot of men kept telling me I couldn't be a pilot because I was a woman, and when I was younger, my parents got divorced.
And somehow I'm thinking somebody telling you no didn't stop you.
No.
And so what stories or facts could you share with us?
There are some legends about me.
Such as?
Well, some people thought that I ran out of fuel and crashed near the Howland Islands. And some people thought I crashed, and some people took me and used me for war.
So they thought maybe you were a prisoner of war?
Yes.
And they never have discovered what actually happened, have they?
Well, scientists have found my bones. Well, they're 99% sure they found my plane and my bones near the Howland Islands.
Wow, but they don't know exactly what happened to you.
Yes.
And brave, why does that describe you?
Well, it does take a lot of guts to fly a plane, and there are many, many dangers of doing that job.
Well, thank you for your courage and for the inspiration you were to many women who eventually followed in your footsteps. Thank you for being with us this evening.
Thank you for having me. It did take a long time getting here.
I'm sure. Eric Liedl. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Sir, am I right in thinking that you and Mr. Abrahams knew each other?
Yes, we both ran together.
And what are you best known for?
I am best known for winning a gold medal in the Olympics 1924 and outrunning all my Sabbaths.
And what struggles did you have to face?
When I was a missionary in China, the Japanese came and took me as a prisoner of war.
Wow. So you didn't stick with running. You actually became a missionary.
Yes, after.
And are there some stories or facts you would share with us?
Yes, while I was a prisoner, I had a chance to leave and go back, but I gave my opportunity to a woman who was pregnant.
That shows a lot of selflessness, and I think selflessness describes you well. But I do have a question for you. How long were you in that POW camp?
I died there, in fact.
And what did you die from?
I died from a brain tumor.
Oh. Why does selfless describe you so well?
I would say selflessness describes me because I put God before my fame.
Well, thank you for your dedication into the many lives that you touched through your work as a missionary, and thank you for being with us this evening.
It's always a pleasure to be here.
Langston Hughes. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Mr. Hughes, would you share with us what you are best known for?
I am best known for being a poet, but I've done many more things, such as starting the Harlem Renaissance, known then as the Negro Movement.
And what challenges did you have to overcome?
At the age of 2, my mom and dad left me not too far apart, and I was raised by my grandmother who meant everything to me, but sadly died when I was 12 years old.
And were there any interesting people that you have met?
I knew Thurgood Marshall in college, and I knew Dr. Carter D. Woodson, the father of Black History, as we created Black History Week.
And what story or fact about you would you be willing to share with us?
I was ready to go to college, but I didn't have the money for it. So I went to Mexico where my dad had lived, and we had a long argument about where to go to college and what major to study. But eventually I got the money for college and went to Columbia University and studied engineering. But I left Columbia University because of racism, and it was like the best thing for me because then I discovered Harlem, where it influenced me to travel around the world, but I never spoke with my father again.
You never spoke to your father again?
Never.
That is so sad. You are known for your writing, and obviously the loss to the world of engineering was a definite gain for the world of literacy. Is there a poem that you would be willing to share with us?
Yes, a dream deferred. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it sags like a heavy load, or does it explode? A dream deferred.
Thank you for sharing that with us. And I know you don't like talking about yourself much. You seem to be a very humble person. And why would humble describe you so well? Why would your friends describe you as being humble, do you think?
Because my people and others came before myself, and being fair was always something that was important to me. So I made sure, or tried to make sure, that everyone was treated fairly.
Well, thank you for that. And again, thank you for your contribution to the world of literature. And thank you for being with us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Marguerite Henry. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
I see in your picture that you are with a pony. Is that correct?
Yes.
Does that have anything to do with why you're famous?
Yes. I wrote animal stories for children.
And what struggles did you have to overcome?
When I was 6, I had rheumatic fever, and it lasted for 6 years.
That sounds like quite a difficulty. And in your career, you said you were a writer. Have you met any interesting people?
Yes. When I was writing Justin Morgan Had a Horse, I met David Danahuet, a 98-year-old resident of Virginia.
That sounds very interesting. And what fact or story are you willing to share with us about your life?
I took care of Misty for a couple of years. In those years, I got inspired to write Misty of Chincoteague.
And is that Misty in the picture?
Yes.
And compassionate. Why does that describe you?
Through my books, I taught children how to love and care for animals.
Because you yourself did?
Yes.
Well, thank you for passing that on to others, and thank you for your contribution to children's literature and for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Ruth Wakefield. Good evening, ma'am. She's one of my most favorite guests for very delicious reasons. Ms. Wakefield, I know that I know who you are, but I'm not sure our audience knows who you are. Would you share with them what you're best known for?
I am best known for inventing the chocolate chip cookie.
There you go. Why, she's my favorite guest. Ms. Wakefield, how did that happen? How did you invent a chocolate chip cookie?
When I was making a butterscotch cookie, I got tired of making the same thing every day, so I decided to try something new. So I cut some chocolate chunks and added them to my recipe that created the chocolate chip cookies.
Well, I'm very glad you got tired of butterscotch and added chocolate, I must say. Did you meet any interesting people in your life?
Yes, I met Senator John F. Kennedy in my restaurant, the Toll House.
Toll House. So that's why they're called Toll House cookies?
Yes.
Oh. And were there any difficulties that you had to overcome?
Yes, I had to overcome making meals and baking cookies for my customers, and I needed time for myself.
I think everyone in here can definitely relate to needing time for yourself because you're so busy. What story or fact would you be willing to share with us?
When I was making a butterscotch cookie, I got tired of making the same thing every day, so I decided to try something new. So I cut some chocolate chunks and I added them to my recipe, and that is what created the chocolate chip cookie.
And why does hardworking describe you so well?
Because I had to make meals and bake cookies for my customers.
Well, I'm glad you were hardworking, and I'm glad you were creative enough to add that chocolate, and I'm really glad you were with us this evening. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you for having me.
Frida Kalu. Good evening.
Good evening.
I must say, I do love the bright colors.
Thank you.
What are you most known for?
I am most known for being one of the best Mexican artists.
And were there any troubles, difficulties you had to overcome?
Yes, when I was 5, I got polio.
That sounds like quite a difficulty, quite an obstacle. If I'm remembering correctly, your husband is an artist?
Yes.
And his name?
Dico Rivera.
And were there any other people that you knew?
Yes, Charles Chapman and Albert Einstein.
And what story would you be willing to share with us?
When I was on the bus, I was in the crash and I was severely injured.
But you were able to paint even through that injury?
Yes.
Persevering. Why does persevering describe you so well?
Even though I had polio, I was still active, and I did still do sports like wrestling and swimming champion.
Wow, that definitely sounds like persevering to do that, having been afflicted with polio. Well, thank you for your contribution to the world of art, and we're very glad you were here with us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Julia Child. Food is a definite good theme here this evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
Ms. Child, those of us of a certain generation well recognize your name and your picture, but there may be some younger ones in the audience that don't know what you are best known for.
I am best known for being a TV chef who cooked French food.
And I remember those shows well. What struggles have you had to overcome?
I failed my test at the Cordon Bleu School of Cooking, and it took me another year to pass.
Well, obviously, you learned your craft well. And what story or fact would you be willing to share with us?
I am 6'2", if you can't tell, with size 12 feet, and I need to counter my height so I don't hurt my back when I cook. So when I had my house built, I made them make the counter my height, and my husband was shorter than me, so he never cooked.
But being the amazing cook that you are, I'm sure he didn't mind not cooking. And entertaining, why does that describe you so well?
Because when I was a child, my parents thought I was mischievous, and they liked that at times. And when I was a teenager, I liked to be a prankster and prank everybody, basically. And I like to make people laugh and have fun while I cook or while they cook.
And that definitely came through in your show. So thank you for your contributions to the culinary world. And thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me. Au revoir.
Joe Lewis. You're not mad at me, are you? Okay. Good evening.
Good evening.
I see that you're always prepared. Mr. Lewis, again, those of us of a certain generation recognize your name quickly. But for those who don't, would you tell us what you are best known for?
I am famous for being an African-American boxer in the 1930s and am best known for my matches against Max Schmeling. Also, I am known for setting a record for the most amount of times I've defended my title.
And how many is that?
With a total of 25 times.
And aside from Max Schmeling, were there other interesting people that you knew?
Some interesting people that lived during my lifetime were Jesse Owens, Martin Luther King Jr., Nelson Mandela, Shirley Chisholm, and Stan Lee.
And what struggles did you face?
When I was 2 years old, my father was taken away to an insane asylum. And since I was alive during the 1930s, it was difficult for my family to bring home money, and I ended up working 3 jobs while also training for boxing.
And how old were you while you were holding down these 3 jobs?
I was only 16.
Wow, that definitely shows dedication to your family as well. Is there a fact or story that you would be willing to share with us?
An interesting fact is that even though my main sport was boxing, I have a golf course named after me.
So golfing was a passion of yours as well?
Yes, I love to golf.
And many people may not think of it because we see the outside persona, but people that know you say that you're humble. Why do they call you humble?
I would say I am humble because I never raise my hand over my opponents in victory.
Well, thank you for being with us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Stan Lee. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
And Mr. Lee, why is your name familiar to so many of us?
I am famous for co-creating Marvel Comics, being the executive producer for Marvel Cinemas. I also have cameos in all the movies, and I have founded a literacy foundation.
A literacy foundation, that's very interesting. Were there difficulties that you've endured?
Yes. My parents didn't have a lot of money as a kid, while I was a kid because of the Great Depression. My child died 3 days after she was born, and business was hard in the 50s because superhero comics were banned.
And you mentioned movies, so have there been some interesting people that you've met?
Yes. I know George W. Bush, Jack Kirby, Martin Goodman, Dr. Seuss, and many of the actors in the movies.
And is there a story that you would share with us?
Yes. During World War II, I created instructional videos as a playwright in the Army Signal Corps.
And I think I know why, but creative has been used to describe you. Would you agree with that?
Yes. I believe I'm creative because I made all these characters from my imagination.
And you have quite a vivid imagination, sir. Thank you for being with us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Shirley Chisholm. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
Miss Chisholm, why do we know your name?
You might know my name because I'm the first female African-American congresswoman.
And did that present some struggles?
Yes, I used to say that I faced a double handicap because I was African-American and I was female.
And being a congresswoman, I'm sure there's some interesting people you've met.
The most recognizable person I ever met was Richard Nixon.
And is there a fact or story that you'd be willing to share with us?
Yes. I tried to run as a Democratic nominee to become the president.
And what year was that?
1972.
That took a lot of courage. And so I would have thought of courage for you, but I see industrious. Why industrious?
Because I showed attention and diligence in all of my work.
Well, thank you for being an inspiration to many and breaking that glass ceiling. And thank you for being with us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Karen Spark Jones. Good evening.
Good evening.
Ms. Jones, your name does not seem quite as familiar to us as many that we've talked to this evening. What are you best known for?
For inventing search engines.
Wow. And what challenges have you had to overcome?
The struggle I had when my husband died.
I can understand that that would be quite a struggle. Are there any interesting people you've met in your career?
Elizabeth Fiendler.
And who is she?
She invented the .coms, the .nets, and the .govs.
So between you inventing search engines and her inventing these .coms, you two women have made an incredible difference in the lives of millions of people around the world.
Yes.
Is there a story you'd be willing to share with us?
I campaigned for women's rights because women need to enter computing and needed more jobs. Because computing is too important to be left to men.
Computing is too important to be left to men. I think I like the way that sounds. Now, I guess I would have thought of innovative, but I see kind-hearted. Why would your friends describe you as kind-hearted?
Because I inspired and helped others to not give up on their jobs.
Well, I know millions in this world are thankful that you did not give up and that you have been an inspiration. Thank you for being with us this evening.
It was nice to meet you.
Robert Ballard. Good evening.
Good evening.
Mr. Ballard, what are you best known for?
I'm best known for finding the Titanic.
And was that difficult?
Yes, me and my crew had to search the entire Atlantic Ocean for the Titanic.
So kind of like that saying, a needle in a haystack?
Yes.
You're looking for something this big and something this big. What other... There was a movie about Titanic, yes?
Yes.
Did you have anything to do with that?
Well, my crew teamed up with the crew that made the movie Titanic to search for the Titanic.
Well, is there a story or a fact you'd be willing to share with us?
Yes, our submarine was called Alvin. It was named after Al Vine, a famous oceanographer. But when you think of Alvin, you think of Alvin the chipmunk.
I will admit that's where I went with that. Driven. Why does that best describe you?
Because I took 12 years to raise money so I could buy some titanium alloy so my submarine could go 13,000 feet into the ocean.
Without the titanium alloy, how deep would your sub have gone?
6,000 feet.
So why did you need the alloy?
Because the Titanic was about 12,500 feet.
And how did the alloy help you?
It helped the submarine sustain the enormous pressures.
Well, thank you for being that driven, and thank you for finding that, and thank you for being with us this evening.
It's been a pleasure.
Ben and Jerry, I told you food was a theme this evening. Good evening, sir. You are Mr. Cohen?
No.
You're Mr. Greenfield. You messed me up. And you are Mr. Cohen.
That is correct.
And in case nobody got it when I said Ben and Jerry, what are you men famous for?
We are famous for co-founding Ben and Jerry's Ice Cream in 1980.
And where is that at?
That in Burlington, Vermont.
And Mr. Cohen, I'll start with you. Well, actually, Mr. Greenfield, I'm going to start with you since you messed me up. What difficulty have you had to overcome?
Well, Haagen-Dazs tried to limit our distribution, but we sued them and won. So now you can find our ice cream all over America.
I am sure glad you won that lawsuit. Me and Chunky Monkey, oh yeah. And Mr. Cohen, what have you had to overcome?
Well, I have nausea. Those who does not know what it is complete loss of smell and no loss of taste. Imagine trying to make food if you can't even taste it. If you can't even taste it or smell it.
Wow. So I am curious, what made you decide to go into the ice cream business?
Well, first of all, we was going to do a baker shop, but the machines cost too much. So instead, we did an ice cream shop.
I'm really glad you did.
Thanks to goodness.
And Mr. Greenfield, is there a story you could share with us?
Well, at college, I took a class in carnival techniques.
Carnival techniques? In college? We didn't offer that at my college.
And I learned how to eat fire. But don't worry, I'm not going to do it to you.
Well, I would think that'd be a little dangerous around ice cream. You'd melt it all. So do you have a favorite ice cream? I'm sure you get asked this a lot. Do you have a favorite?
We like all of them.
And you have come up with some very creative names, too. I must say that's one of my most favorite things about Ben & Jerry's.
We have Peanut Butter Cup, and we have Chunky Monkey, and we have Cherry Cassia.
And I believe there's a certain dad here who really likes Cherry Garcia. And Mr. Cohen, why does adventurous describe you so well?
Because I was in many, many different job fields.
And Mr. Greenfield, why is devoted your character trait?
Well, I had to leave the business for a while so I can support my wife as she finished her PhD.
That definitely is devotion. And again, thank you for your contribution to the world of food. And thank you for being with us this evening.
Thank you for having us, and you're welcome. Thank you.
Good job. Good job. Gates, Jobs. Oh, yeah, Steve Jobs. Good evening, sir.
Thank you. Good evening.
The turtleneck should have been my clue that it wasn't Bill Gates. Mr. Jobs, I can't imagine anybody here that doesn't recognize your name, but just in case someone doesn't, what is it that you are best known for?
I am best known for owning the company Apple.
And were there any difficult things you had to overcome along the way?
I didn't do good in school.
Seriously? All the way through college?
No, through high school.
Okay. And what happened after high school?
I got the wrong diploma, so I went to a good college.
So somebody at the high school messed up, gave you the wrong diploma, and you got into a really good college?
Yes.
I'm guessing you took technology?
Yes.
And is there a story? Well, who are some interesting people? You must have met some interesting people in your career.
Steve Wozniak and Bill Gates.
So I was right. That Gates thing, it got me there. What stories would you be willing, or facts, would you be willing to share with us?
Me and Steve Wozniak were once arguing because I wanted less storage but more graphics in the Apple one, and Steve Wozniak wanted less graphics and more storage.
So who won?
Because I'm the owner of the company.
Ah, and I do know that's one of the things Apple is known for, is their graphics.
Yes.
So, creative. Why does that describe you well?
because I made all the electronics like Apple 1, Apple 2, MP3 player, I think I made the iPhone.
I think you're right. So you definitely are creative, and you absolutely changed the lives of millions of people worldwide. And I want to thank you for that, and thank you for being with us this evening.
Thank you for inviting me.
May Jemison. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
I see in your picture that you have what appears to be an astronaut's uniform on. Does that have anything to do with why you are famous?
I'm most famous for being NASA's first African American female to go to space, but some people even know me for my dancing.
Oh. And did you face challenges? Because you said first female, and I know that usually means that you encountered a lot of challenges.
One challenge was people telling me I couldn't be a scientist or an astronaut because of my race and my gender. Even though they discouraged me, I was encouraged to go to medical school.
And did you do that?
Yes.
And what story or fact would you be willing to share with us?
One story I have is that when I was in the Peace Corps, one of the volunteers got very sick. The doctors thought he had malaria, but the medicine wasn't working. So I was sure that he had a fatal disease, so I worked with him for over 48 hours straight trying to cure him, and he healed.
So your medical degree definitely paid off and saved that man's life. And is there a fact that you were going to share with us as well?
I speak fluently in Japanese, Swahili, English, and Russian.
Wow. And it seems that curious is a good character trait for you. Why is that?
My curiosity in astronomy and science at a very young age led me to want to be a scientist and an astronaut as I got older.
Well, I'm glad you followed that curiosity, and thank you for being the role model that you have been to many women. And thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Cal Ripken Jr. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
I think it's fair to say that you are one of my favorite athletes in the world.
Thank you.
Would you share with us what you are best known for?
I am best known for being a professional baseball player and being called the Iron Man because I beat Lou Gehrig's record of consecutive games played.
And how many consecutive games did Lou Gehrig play?
2,130.
And you beat that record. What was your record?
2,632.
Wow, and it hasn't been broken yet, has it?
No.
And I would say, judging by some of the players today, I don't think it ever will be broken. So what struggles did you overcome?
Well, I had lots of injuries, but I had to play through it to keep my consecutive games going.
And what story or fact would you be willing to share with us about your life or your career?
My mother was kidnapped on July 24, 2012.
I remember hearing something about that. Was she okay afterwards?
She was.
And positive, why does that description fit you so well?
Well, I showed positivity to my teammates and to the people that I play against, and just show it to other people.
I do remember you in your career being a very positive person and an encourager of others. Well, thank you for your contribution to baseball, for being a role model to many, and thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Steve Irwin. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
And Mr. Irwin, why do we recognize your name?
I am famous for being a TV personality, zookeeper, and conservationist.
And what struggles have you had to overcome?
One time I was feeding an alligator with my baby in my right hand, and I got a lot of criticism for that.
I think I understand why you got a lot of criticism for that. And I know you had a TV show. I know people know a lot of things about you. Is there a story that you would be willing to share with us?
Even though I was a crocodile hunter, I took my time to become a professional in mixed martial arts.
And bold. I think I know why bold, but would you tell us why you chose that?
I chose bold because I wasn't afraid to put myself in dangerous situations for people to get to know animals better.
Well, I know we have learned a lot about animals through you, and we thank you for that. And am I right? Have your children followed in your footsteps?
Yes, and I am very proud of that.
Well, thank you for being with us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Pastor Jose Vasquez, our own local celebrity. Good evening.
Good evening.
Pastor Jose, what are you best known for?
I'm a pastor.
And has that presented any struggles? Have you had some struggles in your life you've had to endure?
Yes, in fact, we came to America in 1976, and I didn't know English, so I had to learn English at that age, and it was a struggle. And then I went to, I was the first in my family to go to finish high school, and the first to go to college, Minnesota, and the first to finish my master's in my family.
So you had an affinity for cold weather?
No, but that was the only college that accepted me at that time, so that's where I went.
And have there been any interesting people that you have met in your life or in your career?
Yes, in fact, when I went to college, I went to two colleges, one in Minnesota and then another college in Alabama. So when I went to Alabama, I went to Oakwood College, one of the Adventist colleges, and I met some of the famous preachers like E. Cleveland, C.D. Brooks, Henry Wright, and one time, I was at the South Bend Airport in South Bend, Indiana, and lo and behold, here comes this guy, and I looked at him, and his name is Muhammad Ali, and I shook his hand, and I didn't want to wash my hand after that.
And did he have a strong grip?
Yes.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure I've heard some nicknames associated with you. Captain V?
Yes, we've had the privilege of having Vacation Bible School here for the last 4 years now. Captain V was one of the characters that I played, Super V, Sheriff V, and then the last one was Super PJ.
I do remember that. Something about a Mario costume?
Yeah.
And are there some stories or facts about you that you'd be willing to share with us?
Sure. I have a couple of pictures here. Some of you may or may not know that we have triplets, and so those are the triplets when they were young, and now, that's when they were older, right there. Also, when we were in California, we started the Adventure Club in our church there, and had a chance to go to Mexico and preach some sermons and did some mission trips and to build schools and things like that. And also had a chance to travel to India in 2004 and visited some beautiful places like the Taj Mahal. And it was very, very interesting to be there and to share the Word of God. 756 people were baptized when we were there. All together with all the teams, over 5,000 people were baptized. And it was a wonderful experience. Interestingly enough, when I went there, people thought that I was from India. I don't know why, but I told him, no comprendo, you know. And just to give you an idea, I don't know if you recognize me in that picture, but just in case you don't, here is the, oh, well, it's not working. But anyways, it's right there.
Are you towards the back?
Yes.
Okay. Close to that orange, that
Yeah.
it looks almost like fuselage.
Let's see. There it is, right there.
Okay. Where have you traveled in the world?
Mexico, India, Canada, let's see, Amsterdam. We went to Hawaii, you know, some of those places.
And am I right that you're getting ready to travel somewhere later on in early 2019 maybe?
Yes, in fact, in March, we are going to Israel. And so we need your prayers, and we're looking forward to that.
I can imagine that will be very exciting.
Yes.
And the character trait that I think best describes you is humility. And I think devotion. And I know I would say humility because you are a man who is one of the most humble people we have ever met. And devotion. Why do you think I picked devotion?
Well, I believe God wants us to be devoted to Him and dedicated to Him. And that's the least thing that we can do for what He has done for each one of us.
And that has definitely shown. Anyone that I know that knows you would say humble and devoted. Thank you for everything you've done for us here in Fredericksburg, and I have no doubt that the other churches that you administer to feel the same way. Thank you for being with us this evening, Pastor Jose.
Thank you. Muchas gracias.
And our last guest for the evening is Gabby Douglas. Good evening, Miss Douglas.
Good evening.
Miss Douglas, why is your name so familiar to us? What are you best known for?
I am famous for being the first African American gymnast to win the Olympic individual all-around gold medal.
And was that a challenge, or were there other challenges you faced in your life?
I overcame poverty. My parents were very poor, and when I was a baby, my family lived in a car. I overcame teasing. The other kids teased me and made me sad, but I believed in myself, even if they did not believe in me, and I worked hard every day to reach my goal. I overcame loneliness. At age 14, I went to Iowa to train with Coach Chow. I was very lonely there, and I wanted to stop, but I continued to train. And 7 months later, I won Olympic gold medal.
And what story or fact about your life would you be willing to share with us?
Gymnastics has always been easy for me. My mother said that when I was a baby, I was already squeezing my tiny hands around the bars of my crib, just as I would later grab the uneven bars. At age 3, my sister Ariel taught me how to do cartwheels. That same day, I taught myself how to do them with one hand.
At 3 years old, you were doing one-handed cartwheels?
Yes.
Wow.
I started gymnastic lessons at age 6, and I won almost all my gold medals as a teenager. Now I'm only 23 years old.
And have there been any interesting people you've met in your career?
I have met Michael Phelps, Usain Bolt, and Tom Dolan.
And determination, why does that describe you so well?
Many people told me I couldn't be a gymnast, but I believed in myself, even if they didn't believe in me. And I worked hard every day to reach my goal.
Well, I know you have been an inspiration to many gymnasts, many young women around the world. And thank you for that determination, and thank you for being with us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
And that concludes the interview portion of Biography Tea. Just a reminder, tomorrow we are taking Biography Tea on the road to Chancellor Village. And so please send your children either in the clothing that they have on now or send it with them to change into before we head over to Chancellor Village. And a reminder, as we proceed over to the gym for the food portion of Biography Tea, that there will be some amazing homemade salsa made by Pastor Jose and Miss Sonia that will be available. So please stock up on that. They have graciously donated, I believe it's half of the funds from that, as a fundraiser for the school. So I believe Pastor Jose is going to close this portion out with prayer.
Let us stand together as we pray. Our Father and our God, once again, we are grateful for all your blessings. Thank you, Lord, for being with us in this beautiful program. We thank the teachers and the students, the parents, grandparents, family members who are here. We continue to pray for your blessing upon your school. Thank you, Lord. Now as we are about to go into the gym to eat food, we pray your blessing upon the food. In Jesus' name, amen. God bless you.
And as we have been celebrating